Welcome to Stone Cottage Adventures. Today's video is all about paint. I love paint. It's the simplest, least expensive, and potentially most dramatic way to add color. I said simple, not easy. It's easy to buy paint and put it on the wall, but not always easy to get the right paint on the wall in the right way. But it can be simple with the right tips. So I'll be getting very specific on two topics today. First, how to choose the correct paint colors. Second, how to paint. Really important if you want to have a professional looking job on a DIY budget. Choosing a paint color can be overwhelming. There are over 10,000 commercially available paint colors. Benjamin Moore alone has 3,500 different colors. In reality, the number of colors is infinite when you consider custom mixes. So how in the world do you narrow it down? If I'm thinking about a bold color change, there's nothing more fun than going online, uploading a photo of my room, and playing with a color app. This happens to be the Glidden app, but there are many of them out there. This one was just the easiest and did not require me to create an account. This is my upstairs bedroom, the way it looks now. I clicked on the ceiling, the wall, random spaces to fill it in, super easy, and then selected a wild assortment of colors. I can erase the color if I don't want to include the ceiling. I even tried the room with beige walls. Ooh, much better with a color. And I actually like my original color best, but that might not be your favorite. The Benjamin Moore app allows you to use more than one color at a time on the same photo, which is what I used years ago when I selected the exterior paint colors for our previous Victorian home. Just to make things easier for me this time, I didn't want to create an account, but by creating an account, your photos and paint selections will be saved for you. Pretty handy. For me, this is more fun than those apps that make your face look like an animal. Now, all I will ever use this for is to get a broad idea of my color. Pepto-Bismol pink, mint green, periwinkle blue, banana yellow. I don't even bother to look at their color names or numbers. Selecting the exact color has a whole other process that I'm now ready to begin. Personally, I always head to a specialized paint store like Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams. Looking at that wall of paint chips can be overwhelming, so I reach for the fancy, full color promotional materials in the much more interesting nearby display. Do notice that the samples of the paints are glued on, not printed. They are created with the actual paint, and the images of the rooms duplicate the colors far better than you find on a computer screen or magazine image. Don't worry about the style of the decor. Focus on the feel the paint color creates. I usually go home with several of these great brochures and pore over the colors. Every brochure has selections from each of the basic primary colors, blue, yellow, red, and most of the secondary colors, green, orange, and purple, along with several neutrals. I head home with my brochures, and then the next day I head back to the store and grab 4 to 6 samples of each of my favorites, including ones that are darker and lighter from the display or even to the right and left, and take them home to live with them. When I get home, I tape the chips together to create a large block and then leave them up for a couple of days to see how the colors change throughout the day and under artificial light. You can also order peel and stick samples online, but I'd rather save the money for my next step. When I think I have the right color, I either get a sample size or a quart container and paint a larger area. If it's a big decision, I might invest in 2 or 3 samples to test. Some people recommend buying foam board at the dollar store and painting that so you can move it around the room. That's a good idea, but I like to see how the paint looks on the wall, since texture can make a difference in the color. I always recommend that you spend time with any paint color before you enter a committed relationship. Another thing the brochures can help with is finding trim colors and other colors that will work well throughout your home. Here, are my paint colors. Throughout my house, I have used the same paint color for the trim, and I always make sure the paint colors work well together. I have lots of experience and trust my eye when it comes to choosing other colors for my home, so I was brave enough to go beyond the brochure. I frequently get requests for my main paint color. I will give it to you, but with a big warning. Blonde by Sherwin-Williams is my wall color, and Dover White is my trim. But just like a blonde in a swimming pool, this paint can turn a ghastly shade of green if next to the wrong colors. It works for me and I love it, but it's not for everyone. I use a chip clip to hold my paint chips together. That serves several purposes. First, if I need more paint, I know exactly which colors I have. Second, they are handy if I'm shopping for things and need to know the color, like for a new towel or shower curtain, window coverings, fabrics, or flooring. You're probably thinking about how much time and money this will take just to choose the paint color. I have lots of stories about paints that did and did not work in a space. The stories have all been happy ones since I adopted this practice, even though it requires an investment. But if you're changing the color in a large space, or especially on the exterior of your house, it's easily worth far more than it costs to make the right choice. Some warnings that are worth repeating. First, never choose an exact color from a magazine or computer. Colors are never true on computer screens or the printed page. Those sample chips are more accurate because they are painted, not printed. Second warning, always look at colors in a variety of natural and artificial lights in the actual spaces where they will be used. Do not rush this. And the last warning, when using multiple paint colors, stand back and see how they play with each other. The brochures from the paint stores are really handy for this. All my interior paint colors are Sherwin-Williams because Sherwin-Williams dealer is closest to my house, and you see how many times I have to go to the store. It's not unusual for it to take 4 trips, but never less than 2. In my previous home, all my paints were Benjamin Moore because, you guessed it, they were the ones closest to my home. Our exterior paint colors are all Behr because we were practically living at Home Depot, and at the time, we were choosing very simple colors, a black and a white. Paint technology has come a long way, and so many companies have high-quality latex paints that I recommend doing what is convenient and has adequate selection for your needs. Once you have selected a wall color, you need to think about what color you want your trim to be. I personally like my trim to be a complementary white, which that paint store brochure conveniently recommends. Remember, there are more shades of white than my brain can comprehend. And I like to use the same trim color throughout the house to create a cohesive look. But that might not be what you want. I'm not the final word in good taste. You might want to use your wall color as a trim. 2 things to keep in mind. First, your wall color will probably be a flat or matte finish, maybe an eggshell. Trim paint is usually satin or semi-gloss, so even if the color is the same, you will more than likely want to get different sheens for the wall and trim. The paint store can help you with that, determining quantities and so forth. The second thing you want to keep in mind, if you want the wall and the trim to be the same, you might want to consider going 1 step lighter or 1 step darker for the trim. Super easy to do. Just go to the wall with the paint chips, find your color, look above and below. The change in sheen will already give it a different look. This will just make it pop a little more. Just a thought. I personally am a ceiling white person. It's neutral, less expensive, easy to remember, always the same, adds light to the room, and again, makes the house more cohesive. There's no right or wrong. It's just what I've always done and been happy with. But you might want to paint the ceiling the same as the walls or a completely different color. It is the fifth wall. If you are dreaming of high gloss on a wall, ceiling, door, anything, stop right now and call a professional, preferably one who is a perfectionist and will only settle for the highest quality. But there will be a price to pay. Don't attempt this on your own unless you are a very patient perfectionist, which I'm not. You have my undying respect if you can do this. Before you make your final trip to make your paint purchase, measure the room, including the ceiling height. Note how many windows and doors you have. With that information, the paint store can calculate how much paint you need. Round up if in doubt, and don't buy a quart if you can buy a gallon. So now you have the perfect paint colors, along with a perfect trim color. Time to roll it out? Not yet. No matter how perfect the paint is or how high the quality, it will look no better than the condition of the wall and the accuracy of the application. If you plan on spending twice as much time preparing the wall as you do on painting the wall, you might actually do a good job. First step, make your life easy and take everything out of the room. You won't be tripping over piles, worrying about getting paint on your furniture, not seeing something that needs to be addressed, or hiding Fluffy's fur. Next, remove the covers from the outlets and switches, vents on heat registers. If you're painting the doors and windows, you can leave them hanging, but tape off the hinges and do remove the doorknobs and hardware. Tape off or remove ceiling fixtures, smoke detectors. Carefully keep all the screws and materials together in small containers, and that'll save you time in the future. If a previous painter skipped this step, now is the time to clean up their mess. Next, address what you see when the room is bare. Nail holes, obviously. Any damage, including bubbling or tape that's separated from the drywall, water damage, colors that are bleeding through, any cleanliness issues like dust, cobwebs, oil-based soiling, or Fluffy's fur. These steps are what separate the pros from the amateurs. There are plenty of videos that show how to repair damaged walls. Watch the ones made by professionals. They know their stuff and don't need to bother with fancy pictures. I always recommend that you begin and end the prep work with cleaning. Wipe off baseboards, windowsills, clean away cobwebs and any materials that could contaminate your final product, like hair or Fluffy's fur. For any hole that's smaller than your finger, fast, dry, premium spackling made by DAP is my favorite solution. You can find it at virtually any hardware store. DAP has a lot of products, but this one shrinks less, dries faster, goes on more easily, sands better, just the best product for the job. If your walls are relatively smooth, like we have here in the East, apply the product with a putty knife and sand when it's dry. In the West, where the walls have more texture, you might do better applying it with your finger and duplicating the texture of the wall or leaving the material a little higher and knocking it down as needed. If you have bubbling or tape that's coming loose, remove any damage with a putty knife, repair with the spackling, and duplicate any texture as needed. Again, watch a video by a pro. If some of the people you live with do things like ride their tricycles into the wall, or practice using stilts or a wrestling move, resulting in a larger anomaly in the wall, you can either call a professional or watch another video. It might require cutting out the damaged drywall, replacing it, taping and bedding, and all of that. The same thing is true for drywall that's been water damaged, like in a flood, large or small. I raised 4 kids, so yes, I have needed that type of repair. Clean again, especially dust, hair, and animal fur. Are you getting the idea that fur and hair can be a problem. Priming is the next step of your prep work. The industry standard is KILZ, K-I-L-Z, which makes 2 types of primers, several water-based primers and a couple of oil-based primers. They each have a specific function, so choose one based on your needs. Again, this is sold everywhere. Of course, you want to use a water-based primer because it's easy to clean up after. But why do you need a primer? Well, first, if the drywall is brand new, it is extremely porous. Primer seals the drywall, creating a more stable surface for the paint to bond to. It was explained to me once that primer has more resin, which is the glue, and regular paint has more resin pigments. Another time you want to use a primer is if you're making a big color change, like making a red room beige. The primer will provide better coverage than a single coat of paint or even 2 coats. Or if you're making a room a dramatically darker color, you can have the primer tinted to again provide better coverage. And any large repair needs primer. So why do they still make the oil-based primer if the other stuff works? Because it doesn't always work. Here's some instances. The one I always think of is painting a kitchen. Invariably, there is residual oil on the walls. It will bleed through any paint, leaving a shadow of the original oil stain. Only oil-based primer can block it. Obviously, if you have oil in any location, like a workroom or bathroom, oil-based primer is the permanent solution. Sometimes scuffs on the riser of a tread will bleed through the paint. Again, oil-based primer will solve the problem. If there's been water damage to drywall or any damage that caused the top layer of paper to be stripped away, exposing that brown paper underneath, oil-based primer is needed. Another time when oil-based primer is vital is when wallpaper has been stripped off. Watch a video on that, see how they use trisodium phosphate and our oil-based primer before you paint. Blisters in the surface of a wall, like in a bathroom, should also be scraped down and treated with oil-based primer, or the problem will recur. Primer is designed to be painted over and should always receive a coat of paint, even if it's just white. The next step is to lay out drop cloths. You can put down the handy tape and paper on a hard floor, snugged up next to the baseboard, and keep the floor clean. Preventing a mess is always better than cleaning up a mess. Invest in a good brush that feels right in your hand. I like smaller brushes and my husband likes larger brushes. Do not be tempted to buy an inexpensive brush because you're just going to throw it away. No, no, no. If you take care of it, a good brush could possibly last for decades, and your painting job can too. Now it's time to paint. Start with the ceiling. If you plan on keeping your ceiling the same, you'll be thinking about skipping this step. You have my permission if and only if you still have more of exactly that same paint ready to touch up any place where your wall paint gets on the ceiling, because it will. So like I said, start by painting the ceiling. Cut in around the edges and roll on the paint using an extension handle. Cutting in the ceiling ensures that there will be no gaps between the wall and the ceiling. And yes, there will be ceiling paint on the walls for now. If there isn't, you haven't done it right. While the ceiling is drying, get ready to paint your woodwork. There is an exception to this that I'll come back to. Finally, it's time for the main show, the beautiful color you've chosen for the wall. To create neat edges between the ceiling and the wall, apply yellow frog tape on the ceiling along one wall, using 3 to 4 foot strips to keep it manageable, making sure they're securely affixed by stroking them firmly, maybe using a paper towel to protect your fingers. This will keep the paint from bleeding under the tape. Cut in the top of that wall with the painting brush and then the small roller to create a 4-inch boundary at the top of the wall. Then pull the yellow frog tape off that section of ceiling and move on to the next. So you tape, paint a 1/2 inch at the top of the wall, roll 4 inches, pull the tape. Repeat until you've made it all the way around the room. If the room is really large, you can do each wall in 2 steps. Now you can cut in the corners using the paintbrush to make sure paint is all the way in the corner, and that little 4-inch roller to create boundaries on both sides of the corner. The room is beginning to look like it's framed in your wall color. Once the trim paint is dried, you will use that yellow frog tape technique again that you used on the ceiling to block off windows, doors, and baseboards, a small section at a time. We're only doing one small area at a time because the yellow frog tape is designed to be used on fresh paint, which easily comes off if you use blue painter's tape. Because the adhesive on the yellow frog tape is less sticky, it releases if anything disturbs it. That's why we're working in very small sections and removing as we go. Work your way around the room and carefully remove the tape as you go, definitely before the paint is dried. Once you have a little experience with the technique, it will get easier. You would figure this out pretty quickly, but be prepared. The frog tape will have wet paint on it and can be messy. If you apply your short strips on top of each other, they can be pilled up in a long strip. Have a bag ready to hold the wet tape and towels to wipe your hands on. Once you have cut in the ceiling, corners, doors, windows, and baseboards, you're ready for the big roller and you're almost done. When you first start with the roller, it will not be holding much paint, so your passes will be smaller. After about the 3rd time you load up your roller, you'll be able to put down some serious paint. Work in sections about 5 or 6 feet wide, reworking those rolls so that the paint is completely blended and evenly distributed. Be sure to blend in the paint that you've cut in the corners, above the baseboards, and around the windows and doors. Then move on to the next section and blend the original edge together with your new section. If you take care with this step, you generally won't need a second coat. That's a time saver and a money saver. The most common reason for a second coat is a radical color change. Now all that's left is touch-up using a small brush. The roller probably touched the ceiling. Paint might have oozed under the tape. Use judgment and make it perfect. You prepped the walls, painted the ceiling, then the woodwork, and finally the walls. But sometimes you want to change the order in which you paint. If the spaces where the trim and the walls meet are not crisp, like in our old house that has plaster walls, then the walls should be painted first. Then, with a steady hand, the trim is painted freehand. I will tell you, some professional painters always paint freehand and do it in that order. We tape if at all possible. I think it goes faster. Now I carefully put the lids on all my leftover paint, make sure the cans are clearly marked with the rooms where they're used, and store them inside my house where the temperature is controlled. Once everything is dry, I take away the drop cloths, put the electrical plates and any hardware back on, bring in the furniture, hang the pictures, and enjoy my room. My husband will tell you I'm always the one who will sacrifice quality for speed. Fortunately, I have him to make me behave. He's very pleasant but firm and always right about these things. Let me know if you need him to send you a message. Thanks for watching. See you next time.